Dan Blocker, the immense and beloved star of the iconic television series Bonanza, carved out a legacy that continues to be cherished by fans across generations. But what became of his world after his shocking and tragically untimely demise? What fate befell the homes he once filled with life, the devoted wife who stood by his side, and the children he adored, including one who would bravely follow in his formidable Hollywood footsteps? And just how substantial was the fortune amassed by the actor who so memorably portrayed Hoss Cartwright when he passed away so suddenly, leaving a void in the television landscape? We endeavor to uncover the hidden truths, the profound heartbreak, and the considerable legacy left behind by one of television's most unforgettable and cherished Western legends. Prepare to delve deep into the life, the loss, and the lasting resonant impact of Dan Blocker. Dear viewers, before continuing this video, we kindly ask you to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you want to receive notifications about new video releases, please hit the bell icon. Thank you for your understanding. More than 4 decades after its final episode aired, Bonanza steadfastly remains one of the most beloved and influential TV westerns of all time. The show deeply resonated with audiences not merely for its action-packed, engaging storytelling, but also for its consistent emphasis on strong family values and its commendable willingness, particularly for its era, to tackle significant social issues such as racism, sexism, and the pervasive nature of violence. A monumental part of its enduring success was undeniably the exceptionally talented ensemble cast, which prominently featured Dan Blocker, who captured the hearts of millions with his portrayal of the kind-hearted, gentle giant, Eric Hoss Cartwright. Blocker's sudden and tragic passing left his adoring fans and devoted co-stars in a state of profound shock and disbelief, especially given the incredible professional success he had achieved. At the time of his death on May 13, 1972, at the young age of 43, his net worth was estimated to be around $5 million, according to Celebrity Net Worth, an impressive fortune for an individual who had emerged from such remarkably humble beginnings. Dan Blocker, the man behind the endearing persona of Hoss, made a significant impression from the very outset of his life. Quite literally. Born on December 10, 1928, in DeKalb, Texas, Bobby Dan Davis Blocker tipped the scales at a whopping 14 pounds, earning him the distinction of being the largest baby ever born in Bowie County at that time. In a certain sense, it almost seemed as if he were destined for a certain level of fame, a larger-than-life presence, from the very moment he arrived in the world. When Dan was still a young child, his parents, Ora Shack Blocker, a farmer, and Mary Arizona Blocker, made the decision to move the family to O'Donnell, Texas, a small town located approximately 40 miles south of Lubbock. Shack, having lost everything during the devastating Great Depression, managed, through sheer grit and determination, to scrape together enough money to open a small, local grocery store. In those challenging early years, the family resided in the back of the modest shop, and young Dan diligently helped out wherever he possibly could, carrying groceries to customers' cars and willingly taking on various odd jobs to support the family enterprise. His father used to jest with friends that he'd happily pay them to hire Dan, simply because his son's sheer size and youthful exuberance were inadvertently causing a degree of havoc within the confines of the small store. However, before long, that very physical size would prove to be one of his greatest and most recognizable strengths. At the age of 13, Dan Blocker enrolled in the Texas Military Institute, where his imposing stature made him a natural fit for the football team, on which he played as a formidable linebacker. His evident talent on the field subsequently earned him a scholarship to Sul Ross State University in Alpine, Texas, where he initially planned to study English while continuing his promising football career. By the time he reached the age of 18, he stood an imposing 6 feet 3 inches and weighed nearly 300 pounds, though he would eventually grow another inch and add even more weight as he reached full adulthood. While football may have initially paved the way for his education, it was an entirely unexpected and serendipitous twist of fate that set him on an entirely different and ultimately more fulfilling path. During a college production of the classic play, Arsenic and Old Lace, the drama club found itself in need of someone strong enough to lift and move the heavy dummies used to represent dead bodies within the play. Dan, with his impressive physique, was the perfect candidate for the task. However, he did more than just lend his strength backstage. He ended up taking on the small but memorable role of Teddy Brewster, the eccentric, bugle-blowing nephew of the play's murderous aunts. The moment he stepped onto that stage, everything changed. The undeniable thrill of performing, the palpable reaction from the live audience, the vibrant and infectious energy of the theater, it was an intoxicating and transformative experience. Dan was unequivocally hooked. He promptly switched his major from English to theater, and after graduating, reportedly turned down offers to play professional football. Instead, he resolutely set his sights on the stage, honing his craft by performing in summer stock and repertory theater before eventually landing a small role in a Broadway production of King Lear, a significant early achievement. Then, duty called, and Dan Blocker was drafted into the U.S. Army and sent to fight in the Korean War. He served with notable distinction, earning a Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, along with several other medals and commendations that spoke to his bravery and dedication. By 1952, he had risen to the rank of sergeant and was honorably discharged. That same pivotal year, he married Dolphia Parker, a woman he had met and fallen in love with during his college years at Sul Ross State. With a new wife and burgeoning dreams of a stable and secure future, Dan initially took what seemed like the responsible and conventional path. He returned to school and diligently earned a master's degree in dramatic arts. Now a devoted family man, he and Dolphia would eventually welcome 4 children into their lives: twin daughters, Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, and 2 sons, David and Dirk. Dan initially focused on providing for his growing family by becoming a high school English and drama teacher in Sonora, Texas, before later transitioning to teach 6th grade in Carlsbad, New Mexico. At the time, it may have seemed like just another teaching job, a means to an end. However, with every westward move his family made, Dan was, perhaps unknowingly, inching ever closer to his true and ultimate destiny. Dan settled into married life with apparent ease and contentment. He possessed a deep and abiding love for teaching and genuinely enjoyed being around children, generously sharing his passion for language and drama in ways that likely left a lasting and positive impact on his many students. By all accounts, he had a heart of gold, unfailingly kind and remarkably generous, though he was also known to possess a quick temper at times. Yet just as quickly as he might lose his cool, he was equally swift to apologize and conscientiously own up to his mistakes, a testament to his fundamental decency. When he eventually moved his family to California, it wasn't with grand, preconceived dreams of achieving fame and fortune in Hollywood. Instead, his primary intention was to pursue a PhD in dramatic arts at the prestigious University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, while continuing to teach to support his family. To help make ends meet during this period of academic pursuit, he began auditioning for television roles in the mid-1950s and successfully landed small parts in various westerns, a hugely popular genre on television at the time. Acting had always been a deep-seated passion, and these early roles served to reignite that creative spark, allowing him to step into diverse characters and further explore his considerable talent. Soon, he was making notable appearances in hit series such as Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, Have Gun, Will Travel, and Maverick, where he often had the welcome opportunity to showcase his natural and engaging comedic timing. In 1958, he landed a recurring role in the short-lived Western series Cimarron City. At first, the show's premature cancellation may have seemed like a professional setback. However, in reality, it proved to be a blessing in disguise, because that unexpected twist of fate left him opportunely free to take on the role that would irrevocably change his life and career forever. Any aspiring actor in Hollywood at that time would have eagerly jumped at the chance to be in Dan Blocker's advantageous position. But it wasn't until the visionary producer David Dortort cast him as the unforgettable Eric Haas Cartwright on the groundbreaking new series Bonanza that Dan finally made the definitive decision to put aside his doctoral studies and pursue acting as a full-time profession. And even then, his motivation wasn't about chasing the elusive allure of stardom. It was simply because the role of Haas was so incredibly demanding, requiring such long hours and intense commitment that it left precious little time for anything else. If Little Joe, played by Michael Landon, was the undeniable heartthrob of Bonanza, then Haas was undeniably its heartbeat, the very soul and emotional anchor of the series. As the middle son of Ben Cartwright, a wealthy and principled Nevada rancher and widower, Haas wasn't particularly known for his sharp intellect, especially when compared to his older, more scholarly brother Adam. He was often portrayed as endearingly awkward and painfully shy around women, frequently the good-natured target of pranks and easily underestimated by those who didn't know him well. But Dan Blocker brought something truly special and deeply resonant to the character: an overwhelming and palpable sense of warmth, an innate kindness, and a profound, almost childlike compassion. Haas quickly became a beloved fan favorite, especially among younger viewers who saw in him a gentle, guileless innocence and an unwavering moral compass. In many significant ways, Dan Blocker and his on-screen persona, Haas, shared a deep-rooted desire for justice and fairness, a quality that Dan carried with him both on and off the television screen. He approached the role with a guiding philosophy inspired by the poignant words of the 18th century Quaker missionary Stephen Grellet. "We shall pass this way on earth but once. If there is any kindness we can show or good act we can do, let us do it now, for we will never pass this way again." During his many years on Bonanza, Dan Blocker formed exceptionally close and enduring friendships with his co-stars, particularly with Lorne Greene, who played his television father, Ben Cartwright, and Michael Landon, who portrayed his impetuous younger brother, Little Joe. Their bond extended far beyond the confines of the television screen. Spending long, arduous hours together on set, often from early morning until late evening, 5 days a week, naturally fostered a sense of genuine camaraderie that made them feel like a real family. They frequently socialized off-set, and Dan was even chosen to be the best man at Michael Landon's wedding to Lynn Noe. Despite Bonanza's demanding production schedule, Dan managed to take on a few select film roles, most notably starring alongside the legendary Frank Sinatra in the comedies Come Blow Your Horn and Lady in Cement. Though Hollywood became his professional home, Dan Blocker never forgot his deep Texas roots. He had thoughtfully moved his parents to California to be closer to him, but the people of his hometown, O'Donnell, Texas, never stopped celebrating their beloved hometown hero. They couldn't help but smile at the delightful irony. This studious boy, who was once more likely to have his nose buried in a book than to be out riding horses on the range, had grown up to become a bona fide Western icon, galloping across their television screens every Sunday night, a cherished and familiar presence in their homes. Beyond being an exceptionally talented actor, Dan Blocker was, above all, a devoted husband and a profoundly loving father to his wife and their 4 children. Though his life was tragically cut short, his impact remains deeply and keenly felt by his family, his numerous friends, and his legion of devoted fans. Dan first met the love of his life, Dolphia Parker, while they were both students at Sul Ross State University. Parker, a petite woman standing at 5 feet 3 inches, had grown up on an Oklahoma ranch where her family bred quarter horses. She was diligently working on the stage crew for a university production of Arsenic and Old Lace when fate and a bit of theatrical luck brought them together. During one of the rehearsals, the director, Anne Kate Ferguson, urgently needed a strong individual to carry what was supposed to be a dead body from the cellar set. She spotted Dan in the auditorium, where he was often a spectator, and promptly roped him into the role. Though somewhat reluctant at first, he agreed on the condition that his friend could join him. Before long, both of them were completely captivated by the magic of theater. Their first interaction, however, wasn't exactly a textbook case of love at first sight. Dan had apparently been goofing off in the auditorium, distracting the performers, and Dolphia, ever responsible, had to be the one to politely ask him to leave. But when Dan later realized he had developed genuine feelings for her, he decidedly straightened up, earnestly earning his way back into her good graces. Dolphia soon recognized Dan's innate, natural talent for acting and strongly encouraged him to pursue theater instead of focusing solely on football. By his junior year, influenced by Parker's urging, Dan had fully embraced the stage. Switching his major to speech, he immersed himself in drama productions, joining the Mask and Slippers Drama Club and taking on various roles in plays, including a notable performance in Noel Coward's Fumed Oak, where he played a despicable husband opposite Parker herself. Dan graduated in 1950 from Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, Texas, with a Bachelor of Science degree in speech. Though he was reportedly offered the opportunity to play football professionally, he ultimately turned it down to follow his growing and undeniable passion for acting. After graduation, he and his friend Dennis Reed moved east, joining the summer stock theater circuit, beginning with the Brattle Hall Theater in Boston. That same year, Dan even managed to land a role in a Broadway production of King Lear. But just as his acting career was beginning to gain momentum, his plans were abruptly put on hold when he received a draft notice in 1950. He was inducted into the U.S. Army, spending 4 months stationed at Camp Polk in Louisiana. Even while in uniform, he remained connected to the stage, appearing in a production of Macbeth. After completing his training, he was assigned to the 179th Infantry Regiment and sent first to Japan before heading to Korea, where he endured some of the harshest and most perilous conditions of his life, including being trapped with his squad by enemy soldiers on Hill 255 for 10 grueling hours on Christmas Eve 1951. On September 23, 1952, he was honorably discharged from the Army. Just 2 days later, on September 25, 1952, Dan married Dolphia Parker in an intimate noon ceremony in Carlsbad, New Mexico, with retired Presbyterian minister Reverend J. Dando officiating. Their lifelong partnership was built on a foundation of love, mutual respect, and unwavering support. After their marriage, Dan returned to Sul Ross State University, where he earned his master's degree in dramatic arts. With 4 children to provide for, twin daughters Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, and sons Dirk and David, his teacher's salary wasn't always enough, prompting him to seek out acting roles in television to supplement their income. Dan Blocker did everything he could to provide his children with a normal, grounded upbringing, diligently shielding them from the potentially overwhelming effects of his celebrity status. However, despite his best efforts, ordinary family outings often transformed into public spectacles. Even something as simple as going out for ice cream would invariably draw crowds of enthusiastic fans, both young and old. The constant, unyielding attention understandably frustrated him. He once candidly admitted, "A man never appreciates his privacy until he's lost it. And it bugs me. It really bugs me. I try to keep the family normal, unaffected by father's so-called celebrity. It's a losing battle." Over the years, both of his sons, Dirk and David Blocker, followed their own distinct paths within the demanding world of Hollywood. Dirk became an accomplished actor, while David built a successful and respected career as a producer, even winning an Emmy Award in 1998 for his work on Don King. Only in America. In 2018, Dirk gave fans a touching glimpse into his father's loving nature by sharing a rare throwback photograph to celebrate Father's Day, captioning it with the heartfelt words, "Wishing all fathers and sons a joyous day. Treasure every moment." At home, Dan embraced fatherhood with boundless enthusiasm. His towering 6 feet 4 inches, 320 pounds, source earlier said approximately 300 pounds, then grew an inch and added weight. This seems a later adult weight. Frame became a source of immense amusement as he playfully wrestled with his kids, or humorously muscled his way past them to take over their electric racetrack set. He possessed an enormous heart, and his inherently playful spirit made him as much of a joy at home as he was to audiences on screen. Dan, Dolphia, and their children lived a relatively quiet life in a comfortable 4-bedroom home located in Northridge, a suburb nestled in the San Fernando Valley, approximately 20 miles from Paramount Studios. The house featured 3 bathrooms and a swimming pool, but their lifestyle was far from extravagant or ostentatious. Dolphia drove a 1963 Cadillac, while Dan cruised around in a brand-new Corvette Stingray. Despite his considerable fame, Dan remained remarkably close to his roots, consistently keeping in touch with old friends from his teaching days in Texas and Los Angeles. He and Dolphia generally preferred a low-key existence, consciously steering clear of Hollywood's often frenetic party scene. Dan's influence on his children was profound, especially on his son Dirk. Growing up, Dirk learned from his father that fame wasn't something to be actively chased or overly valued. He also got his first taste of acting by accompanying Dan to work on the Bonanza set. In an interview with MeTV, Dirk shared, "I suppose I was bitten by the acting bug at an early age while going to work with my dad. His schedule was such that this was one of the only ways to spend a lot of time with him. Watching his father on set was, for Dirk, a masterclass in the art of acting. He observed firsthand how Dan and his co-stars would casually chat about current events before seamlessly and convincingly slipping into their characters. More than anything, he witnessed how much his father truly loved his work, an infectious passion that ultimately inspired him to follow in his esteemed footsteps. Dirk eventually carved out a successful acting career, with roles in productions such as The Border, Poltergeist, and 21 Jump Street, and more recently became widely recognized for his role as Detective Michael Hitchcock on the hit NBC comedy Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He married Danielle Aubuchon in 1990, and they have 2 children together. He continues to honor his father's memory, sharing in a 2021 post that hardly a day goes by without thinking of him or feeling his enduring influence. On that fateful day of May 13, 1972, after 13 immensely successful seasons of portraying the kind-hearted, larger-than-life Eric Haas Cartwright on NBC's Bonanza, Dan Blocker passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. His death at just 43 years old sent shockwaves through his family, his wide circle of friends, and the countless fans around the world who had come to deeply love and admire him. It also left the show's producers in an incredibly difficult and unprecedented position, as filming for what would ultimately become Bonanza's final season was just about to commence. Blocker was more than just a beloved television star. He was cherished by his co-stars and the entire crew alike, known for his down-to-earth personality and genuinely easygoing nature. Mitch Vogel, who played Jamie Hunter Cartwright in the later seasons of Bonanza, once described Blocker as incredibly approachable, the type of guy you'd want to grab a beer with after a long day on set. His death created an unparalleled challenge for the long-running series. As one of Bonanza's absolute core characters, His absence made it nearly impossible to conventionally resolve ongoing storylines. At that time, television shows rarely, if ever, had to deal with the real-life death of a leading actor, and the way Bonanza ultimately handled it was, in many ways, groundbreaking for the era. In 1972, just a year before his untimely death, Dan Blocker and his family had relocated to Switzerland. Deeply opposed to the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War, he sought a quieter, more peaceful life, away from the political turmoil gripping his home country. However, his commitment to Bonanza remained strong, and he frequently traveled back to Los Angeles to film the show. When Blocker returned to the U.S. to begin work on what would be Bonanza's final season, he reportedly wasn't feeling well. He was weak and unsteady, prompting a visit to the hospital where doctors determined he needed to have his gallbladder removed. Gallbladder removal, or cholecystectomy, is generally considered a routine surgical procedure. Initially, Blocker seemed to recover well from the operation, relieved to finally be free from the discomfort of gallstones. Everything appeared to be progressing smoothly until tragedy struck. While in recovery, he developed a fatal pulmonary embolism, a sudden blockage in the arteries of his lungs. In an instant, he was gone. It happened with devastating swiftness. One moment he was reportedly optimistic about his future, smiling as he looked ahead. The next, he had passed. Blocker was laid to rest in Woodman Cemetery in his hometown of DeKalb, Texas, where his family held a private funeral. He was buried beside his parents and his sister. Lorne Greene, who played his television father, Ben Cartwright, was utterly devastated by the loss of his longtime friend and co-star. He struggled to imagine Bonanza continuing without Blocker, later telling his wife, "That's it. It's finished." And in many significant ways, he was right. Bonanza would never truly be the same. However, the producers felt that the show deserved a final season, one last opportunity to say goodbye to its loyal audience. To make that happen, they had to take an unprecedented step, doing something that had never before been done in the history of television. The difficult decision was made to write Dan Blocker's character, Hoss Cartwright, out of Bonanza, reflecting the profound and palpable loss that the cast and crew were experiencing in real life. The writers wanted audiences to feel that loss as well, making it unequivocally clear that the show could not simply move forward as if nothing had fundamentally changed. It was an incredibly challenging time for everyone involved. Michael Landon, who both starred in and wrote for the series, had originally crafted the two-part season opener, titled Forever, with Blocker's character, Hoss, central to the plot. But after his passing, Landon was forced to completely rewrite the script, shifting the storyline from Hoss to his younger brother, Little Joe. The resulting episode is one of the most heartbreaking in Bonanza's entire 14-season history. In it, Little Joe falls deeply in love with a young woman named Alice Harper after rescuing her brother, John, from a dangerous poker game. Joe and Alice marry, and she soon becomes pregnant, seemingly setting the stage for a happy and fulfilling future. But tragedy strikes when John's gambling debts catch up to him. A ruthless gambler named Sloan comes to collect what John owes, sending his menacing henchmen to Alice's home. When she refuses to comply with their demands, they brutally beat her to death. John is subsequently shot, and in a final act of calculated cruelty, the attackers set the house on fire to cover up their heinous crime. Joe arrives home to find his world literally engulfed in flames, and the remainder of the episode deals with the devastating emotional aftermath of his profound loss. This marked a significant turning point for Bonanza. Without the grounding presence of Hoss, the show struggled to maintain its emotional core, and his absence loomed heavily over the entire final season. While Forever doesn't explicitly address Dan Blocker's passing in dialogue, the loss of Hoss is deeply and poignantly felt in several moments throughout the episode. Michael Landon later explained that they chose to acknowledge Haas's death subtly, mentioning it in passing rather than making it the overt focus of an entire episode, believing that keeping it simple and to the point was exactly how Blocker himself would have wanted it. One particularly emotional moment occurs when Joe takes Alice Harper to a spot he and his brother Haas used to call their happy place. When Alice remarks that he must have loved his brother very much, Joe's pained, unspoken reaction says everything. Later, when Ben and Joe grieve over Alice Harper and her unborn child at their gravesite, Ben quietly acknowledges that he understands what it's like to lose a son. In another heartbreaking scene, Ben is seen gazing at a picture of Haas on Joe's dresser, his face filled with an unmistakable sorrow. But perhaps the most emotionally charged scene in Forever comes when Ben and Joe visit the charred remains of Alice's cabin. Overcome with grief, father and son embrace and break down in tears in a way that feels completely out of character for their usually stoic personas. In that raw moment, it was clear to everyone on set that Michael Landon and Lorne Greene weren't simply performing a scene. They were genuinely mourning the loss of their real-life friend and cherished co-star. When the cameras stopped rolling, much of the cast and crew reportedly joined them in their tears. Throughout that final season, Ben Cartwright occasionally references the loss of Haas, though the show never specifies exactly how he died. It wasn't until years later, in the 1988 television movie Bonanza: The Next Generation, that fans finally received an answer. Haas was said to have drowned while heroically trying to save another person's life, a heroic end that was fitting for his beloved character. Filming while in mourning was an incredibly emotional experience for the Bonanza family, but in some ways, being back on set allowed everyone to share their favorite memories of Blocker, keeping his spirit alive even in his absence. The truth is, Bonanza was already facing challenges before Dan Blocker's passing. Ratings had been declining for some time, but losing Haas felt like the final, insurmountable blow. The show had also suffered from a major scheduling change. After years of dominating Sunday nights at 9 p.m., it was moved to Tuesdays at 8 p.m., a less prestigious slot. To make matters worse, Bonanza now had to compete with ABC's wildly popular Movie of the Week. Without Haas, Bonanza simply didn't feel like the same show audiences had grown to love. Interest in the final season dwindled, and despite the cast and crew giving it their all, the series came to an end in 1973. Thankfully, Bonanza lived on in syndication, a fitting afterlife for a show that had once been a television powerhouse. At the time of his death, Dan Blocker owned multiple properties, reflecting the success he had built throughout his acting career. One of his most notable homes was a sprawling 5,000-square-foot mansion located in the upscale Hancock Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. Decades later, this same distinguished residence reportedly became the home of rock musician and filmmaker Rob Zombie. In addition to his Hancock Park estate, Blocker also owned a home in Inglewood, demonstrating his real estate investments across different parts of the city. Beyond his personal properties, Blocker's legacy extended to Malibu, California, where a prominent stretch of coastline was named in his honor. Dan Blocker Beach stands as a lasting tribute to the beloved actor, thanks in large part to the generosity of his Bonanza co-stars Michael Landon and Lorne Greene. In the 1970s, the two actors co-owned the beachfront property, and in 1979, 7 years after Blocker's passing, they made the decision to donate the land to the state of California, ensuring their dear friend's memory would live on in a public space. Later, in 1995, the state transferred ownership of Dan Blocker Beach, along with several other parcels of land, to Los Angeles County, where it remains a recognized and cherished landmark today. As this video wraps up, we'd like to remind you to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support is vital for our channel's growth and helps us keep creating content. To be notified about new videos, remember to hit that bell icon. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.